Hi guys, it's Claire Nakti. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be diving into a ton of new research that I've conducted on ASHLESHA NAKSHATRA, revealing its manifestation in our modern archetypes by finding shocking patterns in the lives and works of ASHLESHA natives. In conducting this research on ASHLESHA men and women, this nakshatra's immense power became clear. It blatantly demonstrated its mastery over poison, restriction, and clinging, taught the true meaning of purity, and as you will see, it helped in understanding the devouring nature of raw femininity and the paradox of the danger of the most seemingly delicate things, as well as being the height of the battle-like sexual play between the masculine and the feminine that defines this key Gandanta initiatory stage. Contemplations on the patterns that arose in the life and works of ASHLESHA natives even blatantly brings up sexual teachings that lead to a deep understanding of the first stage of tantric practice and how to approach that practically and mentally. My goal for this research in this series is that the results that arise refine and enrich our understanding of ASHLESHA's ancient associations, bringing light to them and allowing us to comprehend them contextually on an experiential and intuitive level that rescues us from the dangers of assumptions, so that you can truly identify the energies of this nakshatra within and around you. So it's commonly known that ASHLESHA is symbolized by the coiled snake, which ties to the Kundalini, and that is tied to the Nagas, serpent beings. And this symbol arises with this nakshatra in art quite blatantly, as you will see as we go. These serpentine connections are why ASHLESHA worship gives the power, this ASHLESHA Shakti, which is the power to inflict venom or poison. And we can consider that poison is the ability to cause damage to your opponent's nervous system and mind in a way that immobilizes or kills them, which is one method that snakes use to attack. The other method, also relating to ASHLESHA, being constriction, and ASHLESHA is called the clinging star or the embrace. So being the coiled Kundalini, ASHLESHA relates for both its male and female natives to the raw feminine principle in its most dangerous, desirous, and untainted manifestation, coiled at the base and closest to the earth. And its mode of attack and functioning on a cosmic level can be correlated to the I Ching hexagram 9, which is called Hsiao Chu, the taming power of the small. This hexagram means the force of the small, the power of the shadowy that restrains, tames, and impedes things that are much larger. We can understand the power and danger of ASHLESHA in particular when we consider women, in that they have evolved to apply the use of restriction, indirectness, or confusing methods in order to get what they want and need in the world, because they don't have the physical strength to be direct, and so utilize shrewd methods in order to obtain power, safety, and security. These methods are rolled over by ASHLESHA, which is the birth of Mercury amongst the nakshatras, and lies at the Gandanta knot that links together the ending of Cancer Rashi with the ending of ASHLESHA Nakshatra, and therefore represents a key initiatory stage, the gateway to the second stage of nakshatras when you've passed through that first stage. So ASHLESHA, being raw, untouched feminine energy, and being here at the completion of Cancer, also relates to the feminine in its form as a mother that seeks to keep its children in a childlike, passive state for just too long, and is the clinging earth mother at the gate, testing whether or not you will learn to break from her and move forward. So it's an important test amongst the nakshatras of either being forced back into the previous stage of nakshatras relating to being consumed by or subordinated to nature, or progressing into the second stage of nakshatras, which relate to cultivating and satisfying the feminine force of nature in truth and kind of making it your equal or your consort, which reaches its peak in mastery of the material world in Jyeshta Nakshatra, where you master civilization and become powerful alongside nature as you work with it. So this initiatory point means overcoming the stage of being babied and controlled by female and nature energies, needing to break from the frozen, forbidding mother's grip and dive into the art of manipulating and controlling one's own raw sexual energy. Here in Ashlesha, we have the coiled kundalini that craves to be churned, and either you fail to churn it and it lays flat against the earth, impeding, restricting, consuming, and poisoning you, or you learn to charm it and allow it to dance and rise. So being the sleeping and coiled kundalini, Ashlesha relates to frigidity in the sense of the inexperienced individual in his or her ice-cold nature. And what this translates to in real-life symbolism for its natives is a state of a type of virginity, when the libido or the kundalini hasn't been churned or thawed out sexually, even if they aren't a literal physical virgin. The yoni sexual animal type consorts of Ashlesha and Punarvasu, the beginning of Cancer and the end of Cancer, are the cat yonis, and the cat is said to be the least sexual yoni type in the sense of directness or creating progeny and in the sense of penetration. The cat is a creature that is finicky, picky, and very indirect and fixated on hygiene and instinctually resisting all types of assertion. The cat-like nature of Ashlesha natives can be seen in my research on astrological physiognomy, in that those dominated by this nakshatra as well as Punarvasu tend to have very feline features, extremely full and high cheek apples that naturally form narrow, long, tight, cat-like, piercing and sparkling eyes with oftentimes naturally silky, straight, dark hair. So the Ashlesha stage relates to breaking out of motherly restrictions so that one doesn't become frozen and paralyzed in the virginal state. And so it's also the stage of being inexperienced and naive, where as a woman, for example, you're not yet aware of male power or virility, and so you're playing with fire in an almost dangerous way. As Rahu as the god here makes one kind of have an illusion of control or power that a woman does hold over the weak or inexperienced man who falls into the cosmic stages before Ashlesha, but has never yet experienced or invoked the more powerful male energies that come afterwards. Because they've never been conquered or asserted on by a true form of male energy in this inexperienced and virginal state, it's also the stage of immense sexual fantasy, fantasizing about being dominated or overcome, but not actually yet being able to handle a lot of intense sexual exchange or penetration. And so instead engaging in a lot of fantasy and any type of non-penetrative sexual acts. You'll see as we go how this nakshatra relates to all forms of sexuality or sexual play that don't result in procreation. This is why the resistant and finicky cat yonis of Punarvasu and Ashlesha lie before the Skandanta point that in many ways really relates to being able to procreate, and that is why immediately after the Skandanta point we find the enemy to the cat yoni, which is the rat yoni of Magha and Purva Falguni, which rat yoni types are said to be the ones that most emphasize procreation and penetrative sexual acts, being in the 5th house of Leo, relating to fertility and creativity. As Ashlesha is the concept of energetically being virginal, even if you're not literally virginal, the more literal virginity is tied to Virgo Rashi and especially Hasta Nakshatra, which I've discussed in my previous video on Hasta, and both of these nakshatras tie together and will be kind of talked about together throughout this video a few times because they are the two Moon and Mercury ruled nakshatras. So I discussed in my video on Hasta nakshatra how that one relates to virginity in the sense of nuns and saints, etc. The sixth house being the most dualistic house of separating sexuality from spirituality and choosing celibacy as a lifestyle reflecting this viewpoint. To set the stage of what the very beginning of ASHLESHA looks like, it is much like the frozen princess stage of many fairy tales. We can see in films relating to ASHLESHA groups of young women all dressed in white, like the cosmic Nagas described as milky white, who are concerned with purity and, like cats, maintaining their purity, yet are also possessing desires and cravings for experiencing sexuality and encountering the more dangerous elements of the masculine. In the film The Virgin Suicides, starring an ASHLESHA Moon and Ascendant native Kirsten Dunst, and being directed by Sofia Coppola, a woman with Ketu in ASHLESHA who channels feminine mysteries powerfully, we can see young girls who are attempting to emerge from their childhood and explore sexuality and seduction.
Do you like to wrestle?
But who are suppressed and controlled by their religious mother that relates to Hasta nakshatra.
Lux, please put your shit on this instant.
Which we can see with the girls in the story being flooded with this Virgin Mary imagery that's associated with Virgo. When their restrictive mother locks them in the house for weeks on end, they send out hidden messages on these Virgin Mary cards to the boys in the neighborhood, begging to be helped or rescued and taken away, like princesses locked in a tower by the archetypal fairy tale witch. The first young girl kills herself in the symbolic manner of jumping out of a window onto a stake and being pierced, which is the symbolism for the penetration occurring that ended the resistance stage of ASHLESHA and killed the purity and the unpenetrated, coiled nature that was there before, symbolized by the young virginal girl in white. Furthermore, as the name implies, the story ends with all of the young sisters killing themselves in different ways, showing them being frozen in that state of virginity through being unable to escape the grasp of the mother, who tries to suppress them from interacting with male energies and frees them from growing up into their sexuality. We can also see this in many other ASHLESHA related movies that use the imagery of groups of either cheerleaders, or ballerinas abundantly to indicate the controlled, skillful, seductive, yet excruciatingly delicate and pure feminine force of ASHLESHA.
Imprecise, but effortless.
In its fragile state of this collected feminine watery energy of Cancer, before its intense dive into being churned and dominated or penetrated. In the film Black Swan, the main character is a ballerina dancer who needs to learn to channel more sensuality into her frigid and overly controlled dance, but is unable to do so due to her disconnection from her libido.
You're not a virgin, are you?
This is, again, because she's being forced into a childlike, virginal, repressed state by her very restrictive mother. The movie depicts her battle into destroying the heavy inhibitions on her libido, with the encouragement of two ASHLESHA natives, Mila Kunis as her alter ego.
Where have you been?
To the moon and back.
And Vincent Cassel as her dance coach.
Feel my touch. Respond to it.
Who both try to activate and melt her sexual center and work to defeat the motherly restrictions keeping it in a frozen state.
I got a little homework assignment for you. Go home and touch yourself.
The film ends just like Virgin Suicides begins, with an impalement, where Natalie Portman, dressed in white, kills the ASHLESHA alter ego within her, representing the end of this frigid stage and instead becoming and uniting with the sexual element of the raw feminine ASHLESHA force.
It's my turn.
That she was before viewing as Mila Kunis as being separate from her, but she now embodies.
What happened to my sweet girl, huh? She's gone!
And that restriction is broken through this repeated allegory for sexual penetration.
Young princess, I always knew you had it here. What did you do? What did you do?
Both films end with the blatant defiance of their now horrified and miserable mother. The crossing of the Gandanta point of Ashlesha and risk of being devoured before escaping the mother's grip is also shown in the modern Suspiria, directed by an Ashlesha native, where ballerinas are trained to, through channeled dance, become host bodies as sacrifices to what is called the Three Mothers, gruesome ancient witches who consume the young women. Ashlesha is a Gandmal and dreadful moon placement and can mean as a moon that their mother holds them back so much on an unconscious level that they're an extension of their mother's consciousness and submerged and controlled by their mother, and must rise out of that drowning energy. And then this frozen and forced virginity is also shown in another of Kirsten Dunst's roles in Interview with a Vampire, where she is, through having become a vampire, unwillingly stuck as a child forever and can never engage in the sexuality and seduction that she craves, even as internally she ages to 30 years old or more and envies the sexualized women around her.
You leave a corpse here to rot?
I wanted her! I wanted to meet her! Do you want me to be a doll forever? Can't I change like everybody else?
This mode of suppressing females from interacting with male energies is also shown in another way in art, in that almost all highly famous kissing scenes between two seemingly straight girls involve an Ashlesha woman, or are created by Ashlesha natives. In most of these films, the scenes take place in a more sinister and parallel, restraining and clinging way, for one woman to dominate over or control, subjugate, or suppress another girl from acting on something or from interacting with male energy.
I guess I'm just scared.
Of what?
Duh, boys. Never even gone to first base with a guy.
Haven't you ever practiced on one of your girlfriends? You want to learn or not?
Or they are included to indicate a woman who needs to face repressed elements contained within her frozen cat-like sexuality, that she can't face comfortably with a man because the heated male energy feels too intimidating or violating for her level of natural cat-like purity, and so a more heated woman helps to melt the ice first in a more comfortable way. The fairy tale of Snow White in particular especially ties to Ashlesha and shows the cosmic difference between Hasta and Ashlesha, in that all young women facing young adulthood seek to fight against the barren, untilled earth, the hag energy of Virgo or Persephone that tries to attack the little princess, the Virgo energy that battles to cut off all women from male influence or the satisfaction from a passionate partner.
Mommy?
And leave men and women in a state of virginity, even into old age, which is why Venus is debilitated there in Virgo, and Virgo being barren resists all fructification. Snow White also sets the stage of Ashlesha, in that it's a woman surrounded by men who first of all can't overcome or assert on her, as are the men who fall before the Skandanta point on a cosmic level, under the control of the feminine or of nature, as you will see far more as we go. Those under the grasp of the water element, the Svadhisthana center, are so easily polluted, as water is the most easily polluted element, and that's why this is where women under this element are so concerned with purity, as they understand how vulnerable they are. Hasta and Ashlesha both relate to how one utilizes the Svadhisthana center, whether defensively or aggressively, hiding the beauty in a way that is safe, barren, and saint-like, or utilizing it dangerously as a kind of mesmerizing and playful temptress, as Ashlesha does, because deeply it does want to evoke masculine forces to assert on it, while Hasta thoroughly wants to avoid them. In Snow White, the old woman of the barren Virgo energy, as her stepmother, represents the stage of Virgo poisoning the young woman to be frozen forever unless a man would ever kiss her, an allegory for this idea of the debilitation point of Venus, and Ashlesha being the teetering stage of if an individual will wake up and warm up into an autonomous and sexual being, or will remain frozen in a virginal and stagnant childlike state. The way that the queen's intelligence and cunning wasn't enough to overcome Snow White's beauty and purity also ties to the way that Ashlesha is cosmically inexperienced, naturally pure and delicate, but that this paradoxically gives these women immense power over others, as Snow White pulls on the compassion of tons of men throughout the story who immediately pour energy and care towards something in that state of raw femininity. And this ties to a lot of the secrets of feminine nature that I discussed in my video on Venus dominant men, that relates to the way that it's shown shown in research and the immense popularity of things like 50 Shades of Grey all over the world, that female sexuality, which ASHLESHA is the absolute base foundational essence of, craves to be conquered and dominated, and that's what truly satisfies the passively oriented partner. Attaining someone who genuinely, passionately asserts on them. It relates to waiting for the right thing. As the receptive element physically, it can't invoke what it wants to happen to it through action, like the active partner can, but waits for something to assert, even though it is oftentimes innocent and can't even understand that that's what it's doing, which develops into a type of stir craziness or a type of rebellion and wildness on the part of the woman who is trying to evoke virile forces to notice her and come and bind or control her in a sexual manner. Paradoxically, you become like a monster at the height of the feminine and passive principle in its most dangerous state, like a restless snake waiting in absolute stillness for a dynamic and active being to approach. So ASHLESHA is like a group of pure water creatures waiting in a kind of angsty, sexualized way for something, and then whether or not that thing is actually strong enough to assert on her that she can't consume him, and so then she uncoils and begins to rise and experience bliss. ASHLESHA is such intense, pent-up, feminine energy that although being inexperienced and therefore unaware of its fierceness regarding virility, it is the most fierce of all if you try to engage sexually with it and you are at all unprepared to face the truth of the feminine principle. It's the stage of having so much pent-up energy that you're imagining and fantasizing about the most assertive man or partner possible and then remaining cold and energetically pure. And due to its extreme pent-up, repressed, and tightly wound sexual energy, it annihilates and alternatively quickly dominates over whatever doesn't dominate over it. In this stage, we can see an immense amount of battle-like sexual play between the genders of who will dominate who and who will cause the other one to release. And in a literal or blunt way, we can imagine this or can symbolize this as who causes who to orgasm first, which I'll describe in more detail in regards to Tantra towards the end of the video. Symbolically, if the man wins, or the will wins, and he causes her to release through his self-mastery, virility, and control, they pass to the next stage and she is satisfied. But if the female wins, or you could say the unconscious element or the uncontrolled Shakti, and he releases first, then he fails and she reconsumes him into nature and must search again for a consort who can uncoil her. So she progresses forward with him, as this is the point of uniting of the desires of both the passive and the active that become a vehicle for moving forward. This dangerous and stir-crazy nature is shown in a vast amount of films depicting the feminine as a threatening, monster-like serpentine energy. These films show a man being tempted sexually, yet he's non-virile or uncontrolled sexually, and she's able to overcome him.
Colin's really nice. He's into maggot rock. He wears nail polish. My dick is bigger than his. Well, I think he's really cool.
And so he's reconsumed and absorbed into nature, literally eaten and digested by her in these films.
I need you frightened.
In the film Jennifer's Body, it ties to the themes that we've previously explored, in that a band wants to get famous and wants to sacrifice a virgin in order to get fame. They sacrifice Jennifer, ASHLESHA Moon Megan Fox, who they believe is a virgin paradoxically based on the way that she acts so overtly sexual, which they believe is a trait of an inexperienced woman unaware of the dangers of men, which is true of ASHLESHA, and I'll explore that more.
They're just boys. Morsels. We have all the power. Don't you know that these things? These are like smart bombs. You point them in the right direction and shit gets real.
But her inexperience can be shown in that she really is abducted by these men, and her true vulnerability is revealed, even though her more discerning and less overtly sexual friend is safe. And so Jennifer is killed even though the men were wrong and she wasn't a virgin, which messes up the ritual.
We come here tonight to sacrifice the body of Jennifer from Devil's Kettle.
Please.
We deliver this virgin unto thee.
Again, she's penetrated with a knife like in the other ASHLESHA films, but she doesn't fully die because she wasn't actually a virgin and instead turns into a man-eating snake-like monster. This is also shown in Interview with a Vampire, in that the eternally doll-like woman eats, poisons, and consumes others. In the film Hiss by ASHLESHA Moon director Jennifer Lynch, a Naga queen's male consort is stolen by a man who is sick, who steals the snake to coax the Naga queen to come to him so that he can use her healing powers. The queen snake transforms into her form as a beautiful female and travels through the land to find her stolen consort. Along the way, when two men are tempted by her and try to sexually abuse her, she turns back into her monstrous snake form and eats them whole. The movie makes a clear gesture to show the eaten men's uncontrolled and untamed sexual nature, in zooming in on sexualized photos of women on the walls after the killing. This is also shown in the film of actress Sri Devi with ASHLESHA's son, where any of the men that do not know the tantric art of snake charming or controlling the kundalini, who move in response to her, are attacked by her. Instead of staying controlled, which is an allegory for their own sexuality, as I will illustrate more. An interesting note from Physiognomy about ASHLESHA in relation to this snake and vampire symbolism too, is that ASHLESHA women often have notably protruding but tiny canine teeth, where the front two teeth actually are de-emphasized and sort of laid back, a lot like a snake or a cat. In this way, the women consume uncontrolled male energy while still remaining pure and unpenetrated. And this is shown by the very similar scenes in both the film Hiss and in Jennifer's Body, which both depict the woman swimming naked in the river after consuming the men, emphasizing her snake-like energy and focus on purity and hygiene, and her ability to overcome and absorb male energy without being defiled, because she is simply absorbing those who are not capable of fecundating her or satisfying her, as a virile man who has control of his own kundalini is able to do. So Kundalini is Ahamkara, our ability to identify with our physical body and individuality. The problem is that to identify with the physical body is in essence a grand illusion, and Kundalini is therefore also the reason why human beings are trapped and deluded in the material world and need to awaken from their slumber. When a person can overcome all illusion, their Kundalini is able to rise up through each center and they are liberated and unbound. ASHLESHA rules the terrible aspect of the Divine Mother, the Hydra that must be overcome in order to free yourself from her paralyzing and deluding grip and experience enlightenment. This dreadful Tiksha Nakshatra is the controlling and dominating aspect of the goddess that represents the reason why sex with a woman as a spiritual practice is sometimes called Lata or creeper vine sadhana. So if you consider the image of the Shiva Lingam, which is surrounded by the clinging and restrictive yoni, ASHLESHA is the restricting power and also the clinging power, just as our nervous system allows us to cling and identify with our bodies. So as a sexual allegory, the phallus of Lord Shiva is firm and erect, and the yoni derives pleasure trying to crush and squeeze it, and it remains firm. The goddess is always searching for male energy that tries to rise up and stand firm, and then envelop and restrict it, as this is her natural and sacred function. And it produces a great deal of pleasure when male and female interact in this way, and the male energy is controlled and powerful enough to restrict being overcome by her squeezing, which again relates to the first stage of Tantra that I'll discuss at the end. This is the nakshatra that relates to the transformation of female energies into either the dove or the serpent, which both represent the kundalini depending on whether it is moving horizontally or vertically. When we aspire to the heavens with pure concentration and spiritual aspiration, she becomes a dove, and when we apply her force to earthly matters, she is a serpent. ASHLESHA is the Shekinah, the divine feminine presence on earth, the lowest and the highest thing depending on how you approach it. Because the essence of the great work or the highest spiritual thing is the spiritualization of matter. For example, there's an entire mythology surrounding pregnant women being able to destroy the poisonous power of snakes, and it relates to pregnant women being nourished from being fecundated and heated by male influence or past the skandanta knot as we move towards Leo and the rat yonis, while a girl who has become a woman but is still in her sexually unthawed, ice-cold sexual stage is considered to be in her stage as a tempting, threatening serpent, which is the cosmic stage of ASHLESHA in totality. I've talked before about how overtly sexual in movement, behavior, and facial expression that ASHLESHA women have the power to be if they decide to turn it on. Through every facial expression and every word, they're like aware that they're trying to be sexual. They're like sticking their tongue out and posing and twisting their hands and laughing and tilting their head up. In my survey of Instagram models, ASHLESHA was the second highest moon, which can be understood as due to its desire to titillate sexual enjoyment while also being in the safety and privacy of its home, the 4th house of Cancer, but still absorbing much loose and uncontrolled energy in an indirect way. It is a nakshatra that, due to its resistance towards penetration and fixation on purity, being a sattvic nakshatra, it's all about the buildup of energy and being tantalizing. ASHLESHA, being the Nagas, likes having a different kind of sex relating to exchanging magnetism, not frictional, and they will do anything to exchange energy as much as possible without being penetrated. Their diverting feline nature, working to draw on energy from those who perceive them, yet keep it from truly accessing them, means, as I said, that they build up the most intense, pent-up sexual energy that can be hard for the average man to measure up to, and therefore takes on the dangerous form previously explored. This rich fantasy and imagination that you are about to see is typical of the 4th house of Cancer. This can be seen in that the most popular erotic novel of all time, 50 Shades of Grey, was written by ASHLESHA moon native E.L. James, showing how ASHLESHA can speak to the unconscious sexual desires of the feminine masses. 50 Shades of Grey is rich with fantasy about a passionate, virile male force craving to have total control and domination over Anna, the virginal girl in the story, emphasizing bondage and many more indirect sexual acts. The wealthy Christian Grey, played by an actor with either ASHLESHA or Maga Moon, attempts to bind her in a contractual, dominant, and submissive agreement. These entire novels represent the abundant sexual musings and fantasies that can flow from ASHLESHA women who will only accept an extremely passionate and intense partner and will naturally dominate over anything else from the sheer force of her pent-up sexual energy that is so frozen it requires extreme sexual heat to churn it to satisfaction. A parallel film is the classic Belle de Jour, starring ASHLESHA moon Catherine Deneuve, and this film is often compared to 50 Shades of Grey. The film depicts a woman who diverts her husband away and rejects his gentle advances.
Non, je t'en prie.
Repose-toi.
Even though she's constantly fantasizing about being dominated by him or other men.
À quoi penses-tu?
Nous promenions ensemble dans un landau.
Lâchez-moi!
Toujours le landau? Comme ça. Elle est à vous maintenant.
In very extreme ways, including bondage, rape, etc. And the film makes a purposeful decision to progressively make it more difficult to tell as the viewer when she is fantasizing and when she is experiencing real life, mimicking her own immersion deeper and deeper into erotic imagination.
Moi ça m'excitait puis tu me laisses en rade. Les chichis ça va bien un moment, mais là j'en ai ras le bol. Là. Voilà, j'aime mieux ça. Alors, c'est la manière forte qu'il te faut?
So interestingly, throughout the fantasy scenes there is seemingly random symbolism relating to cats. Meowing cats are often heard at key moments, and she makes odd and seemingly out-of-place statements such as, "Don't let the cats out,"
Pierre, je t'en supplie, ne lâche pas les chats!
when she's trying to hold the energy in the realm of fantasy rather than acting on these fantasies. On a side note, I've encountered the symbolism of frozen cats or frozen people in dreams during ASHLESHA moon nights or regarding ASHLESHA individuals very frequently. This is the stage of being frozen in their sexuality, unable to act because it's the height of the passive principle and they can't understand why they won't open up and don't want to open up to lukewarm men or women or lukewarm sexual advances. Instead, they can begin to victimize their lukewarm partner, rejecting him or even cucking or dominating him, as you'll see as we go. In Melancholia, Kirsten Dunst rejects to consummate her wedding with her new husband. due to his weak advances and his passionless and dull nature being described in the film as unintelligent. Instead, a painting-like scene depicts her running away in her all-white bridal gown covered in rope-like objects, showing how he failed to bind her through his lack of virility, and she takes the frustrated and stir-crazy energy out by dominating another man on the golf course. There's also a famous scene of her in the film, pale and white and naked like a naga, laying on the riverbed, much like the swimming scenes we saw in the previous films about nagas. In this scene, she's basking in a sexually excited state in the light of a planet that's coming to crash in and destroy the Earth, a planet which everyone else fears terribly as it represents chaos. Her role in this film relates to the way that because Ashlesha is so cold, unchurned, and restrictive, that it would call upon itself a huge, powerful, and dangerous masculine source of burning energy to release her from this frozen and stagnant state and from her melancholic pain of being unable to find passion in the men around her or meaning in her life. This desire is fulfilled for the Ashlesha native in the movie River of No Return, starring Ashlesha's son Robert Mitchum and Ashlesha Ascendant Marilyn Monroe. He can tell Monroe desires him and that she's being indirect and sly and diverting his energy and attention from asserting towards her. As a passive partner does this, unconsciously or consciously, to test the one they want. But unlike the many men you will see in the examples to come, he brings her into bliss through a physical chase and wrestle, pursuing her passionately in a way that actually excites her. And then, a further metaphor to the cat, he gets called away from this by a cougar attacking his son. Immediately, the scene cuts instead to him diving to wrestle the cougar, this paralleling the willingness to dive into the more mysterious and dangerous aspects of female sexuality and bravely assert on the woman who desired him in a way that brings her actual satisfaction. Contrastingly, dominating over the man, when it is not shown as blatantly or obviously as being eaten by a monster-like woman or snake, it's shown as the man becoming literally bound, cucked, or paralyzed while the female energy is freed, because of what Ashlesha does with its power to poison and restrict. As you will see in the examples to come, the men who are overcome or dominated are often portrayed by those with Punarvasu Nakshatra, as Punarvasu is the natural male cat yoni consort to the feminine Ashlesha, and these films show more what it means to pass or fail to pass this initiatory state. Because Ashlesha is the baby Mercury state and the untamed and undirected female energy, they often purposefully choose men that they can beguile, intellectually outsmart, and run circles around because they settle into the position of dominating male energy simply due to never having experienced anything else in a cosmic sense, and then they remain with a man they're overcoming while becoming overly immersed in fantasy. And this relates to Punarvasu being the birth of merciful, generous Jupiter energies, a nakshatra which is very gentle and mentally soft, as I'll explore in that video. The interplay between Ashlesha and Punarvasu tends to translate to the dangerous nature of the collected feminine and the uncontrolled man who's thrown around by it, which can firstly be seen in the painting The Puppet by Punarvasu moon artist Goya, portraying an unintelligent man being totally controlled by women and totally enslaved to his attraction to her. In Belle de Jour, her gentle husband is first cucked by her becoming a prostitute without his knowledge in order to engage in her S&M fantasies. During these escapades, she meets a virile and aggressive man she's satisfied by, who then comes and paralyzes her husband before he is killed himself. She then has twisted the situation through her energetic thrashing to have total control over her husband, being his nurse, and remarks that her fantasies have stopped because she is eaten and dominated over him completely, poisoned and paralyzed, and so the frantic battle of whether he would ever assert was over, and neither ended up satisfied.
Curieux, depuis que tu as eu ton accident, je ne rêve plus.
In Venus in Fur, an Ashlesha woman, who is actually a scornful goddess in disguise, comes to audition for a role in a play where she would play a kind of dominatrix, and is initially subordinated to the playwright/director in seeming uneducated and brash, acting ditzy and incapable.
Vous trouvez pas ça porno? Même pas un chouïa? Je veux dire, vu que ça a été écrit genre au Moyen-Âge, enfin en 1800, je sais pas.
As they rehearse, she facetiously feeds his ego when he foolishly claims to understand women, saying he knows that what women really want is power and to dominate over men, but really that is just the fantasy he's projecting onto them, and he doesn't care to find out what she really wants.
Votre cœur?
Être votre chose, chausser vos pieds, ne plus avoir de volonté propre.
Vous appelez cela de l'amour?
C'est le seul amour qui soit. En amour comme en politique, un seul des partenaires doit avoir le pouvoir. L'un doit être le marteau et l'autre l'enclume. J'accepte volontiers d'être l'enclume. J'arrête.
Non, continuez, j'adore. Thomas, mais quelle intelligence, surtout en ce qui concerne les femmes, hein. Vous comprenez vraiment les femmes.
Oui, oui, des années d'études. J'en étais où?
Vous étiez l'enclume.
Oui.
In the play, in a similar manner to Belle de Jour, as they play act the rehearsal, her character binds and controls him, who is playing the weak man, while her character is desiring a virile man in the outside world that they speak of but we never see.
Tu m'ennuies. Tu pleurniches tout le temps, tu m'ennuies.
C'est le comte. Vous êtes amoureuse de lui.
Qui puis-je s'il m'a suivi jusqu'à Florence?
Il ne vous aime pas, il vous convoite comme il en a convoité 1000 autres.
Espèce de porc insolent, comment oses-tu me parler sur ce ton?
The movie symbolically depicts the way that the actress slowly manipulates the situation into her total control and domination over him. She twists him into beginning to cheat on his fiancée, sabotaging his will with her seduction.
Mais il manque quelque chose, Thomas.
Ça sort d'où, ça? C'est pas dans le...
J'improvise.
And reveals her powerful nature by the way that eventually she has tied him up and bound him to a phallic object, reversing the situation until he is in the feminine and subordinated position due to his weakness, dishonest behavior, and innate desire to be dominated by the feminine force of nature rather than to fecundate and satisfy it. The thing that started out as fiction while they were rehearsing the play became reality. The film ends with her having taken her goddess form and the words, "But the Almighty Lord hath struck him and hath delivered him into the hands of a woman," an implication that when you want to submit to a woman and be dominated, ASHLESHA teaches that nature will ensure it takes place, and that is actually him withholding his responsibility, passion, and virility from satisfying her, and therefore instead you become paralyzed or bound by her in a sinister and scornful manner, dragged back into nature's power. She scornfully leaves him bound for his fiancée to find in his weak and shameful position. Venus in Fur is directed by Punarvasu moon native Roman Polanski, who has said before that he casted Matthew M. Alric in the film to sort of portray him, and critics called the film a self-flagellation of Polanski's past actions, and so shows Punarvasu being dominated by ASHLESHA directly. This type of domination through literal paralysis is also shown in the film The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, which stars the same two people as Venus in Fur, about a man who is completely paralyzed except for blinking his eye, and Emmanuel Sainer plays his estranged wife. So we are beginning to see the themes of ASHLESHA women accompanying a bound or paralyzed man many times. In the film Knock Knock, written, directed, and produced by ASHLESHA Ascendant native Eli Roth, Punarvasu moon actor Keanu Reeves is a married man who's seduced by two young playful girls who knock on his door pretending to need help while his wife is away, and then have a threesome with him. It unravels in the film that the girls simply do this to test if men will be faithful to their wives, or whether it is the women in their seduction who will have the power. And when he caves into their seductions, they bind him, torture him, and rape him on camera.
That's my daughter's. You take that off.
You like how it fits me, Daddy?
Take those off, you fucking crazy bitch!
The film again ends with him being completely paralyzed by the women due to them burying him in the ground up to his neck and leaving him for his wife to find. In the film The Beguiled, also starring Kirsten Dunst and being directed and written by Ketu and ASHLESHA Sofia Coppola, a Punarvasu moon man, Colin Farrell, is injured and disabled, again much like the debilitating and paralyzing energy of ASHLESHA, and is found by a little ASHLESHA sun girl who brings him to her household school full of women all dressed in white, who carry him in his helpless state. Throughout the film, it emphasizes how his presence excites their fantasies and sexual desires. All of the more mature girls there crave to pull on and tempt his energy, as it's during the war and so they are deprived of masculine energy. And while under the pretense of helping him heal, they actually injure him further over time and break him down. One night, each desirous woman waits by her door to see if he will enter her room and choose her to have sex with. But when he chooses the virgin teenage girl, the older women realize the game he was playing with them and become scornful. This Punarvasu man is consumed and annihilated by these heavy and instinctual ASHLESHA energies.
Give me the key.
You know I'd get in trouble for that.
Literally disabled, mangled, and then actually poisoned to his death by these women, much like ASHLESHA Shakti relating to poison and paralysis.
Is that my recipe?
It is.
What are done to me, you vengeful bitches!
In Book of Revelation, directed by an ASHLESHA Sun woman, an ASHLESHA Sun classical dancer man is drugged and abducted and bound by 3 women, and they proceed to mutilate him and use him for their own physical and psychological gratification for weeks following, a shocking allegory for the 2 extremes on a cosmic level of ASHLESHA and the danger of pent-up feminine sexual energy, either completely paralyzing, restricting, even cucking the person that they're with, who isn't virile enough to unwind her, or will be completely blissfully dominated by someone she finds attractive. When as a man you are failing to the feminine aspect of ASHLESHA, it functions as a poisonous energy dancing around and embodying your projections, but as something you can't overcome or obtain. In the Virgin Suicides, the young girls have immense power over the young boys who can't penetrate their veil of mystery or win over their love. And so the whole film depicts the way the young boys are just helplessly fantasizing about the sisters, thinking of them as these larger-than-life and unattainable things when really they were just sad, suppressed beings, not realizing that as men they could just act or just assert like the girls wanted them to. And the young boys are totally bewildered by the men in the story who are capable of getting a reaction from the girls.
Look, she's laughing. He made her laugh.
Ultimately, that's what makes these boys unable to rescue the sisters from the suicide, even with their abundant pleas for help. And so the girls scornfully kill themselves right in front of the immature boys who thought they could save them. And the original novel of this film was written by a man with Punarvasu moon. This also mimics the 7 dwarves in Snow White, which is shown in an artful manner in the music video Sown by Rammstein, which shows the more sinister imagining of this tale when you really think about it, in that it's 7 men pouring energy and attention into a larger woman who they can't fecundate. And so when she's frozen, for example, even though they love her, they can only lay her out for a more virile man to find and save.
These girls make me crazy. If I could just feel one of them up just once. What?
In The Wicker Man, a film starring ASHLESHA Moon and Ascendant native Britt Ekland and ASHLESHA Moon Edward Woodward, he goes to the island of a pagan cult, and Ekland is depicted as a siren-like woman singing in a witch-like way to tempt him, who is described in the film as a virgin man. Literally starts shaking and sweating as she goes into this slapping, intense dance, and this shows that he will be the human sacrifice for their cult because he fell under her spell uncontrollably, and she was able to pull on his nerves in that way. Mercury, ASHLESHA's Nakshatra lord, is the communicator and strongly relates to how we use our nervous systems to communicate with others. This nakshatra relates to being able to cause uncontrolled nerve reactions in others, which is what poison does, but also when we arouse another person in a way that's involuntary for them and control them, but through titillation, relating to its mesmerizing nature. This alludes to the aspect of Kundalini, which is the generative force or libido, and the type of control that you can gain over this within yourself, which also then gives you control over the sexual energy of others who don't control their own Kundalini. So active masculine energy is vulnerable when they're like a virgin on a cosmic level, because it shows that they can't or haven't yet controlled or activated their own internal snake, and so they are often easily controlled by others. This relates again to this stage on a literal level relating to creating progeny or succeeding at the loss of virginity. And the darker reality of history that many genetic scientists claim is that only about 40% of all males who have been alive reproduced due to being barred from the reproduction game by the world's choosy females and rare, powerful males. And at one point in history, only 1 man reproduced for every 17 women. The mystery of this initiatory stage is shown in a scarily revealing way in the film also starring Punarvasu moon native Colin Farrell, The Lobster, which is directed and written by an Ashlesha moon man, Yorgos Lanthimos. In this dystopian film, all individuals are sent to a hotel where they have only 45 days to prove that they are capable of attaining a partner to marry, or they are literally turned into animals.
And the dog?
My brother, he was here a couple of years ago, but he didn't make it.
As you understand from your brother's experience,
If you fail to fall in love with someone during your stay here, you'll turn into an animal.
It's no coincidence that the targets are shaped like single people and not couples.
now have you thought of what animal you'd like to be if you end up alone?
Yes, a lobster.
A striking allegory for being reconsumed into nature when you can't pass the Skandanta point relating to being able to unite with a consort and mix the opposing energies of either the feminine and masculine, or you could say the passive and active. Ashlesha women are often cast as dominatrixes in films or TV shows, again because it relates to the terrible aspect of the hungry feminine, the Hydra, that rejects anything lukewarm. It will take on an aggressive expression and attack and crush anything feeble, but will blissfully envelop anything firm as it achieves satisfaction. These Ashlesha films are all so shockingly linked for anyone to see, and everyone notices, but not realizing that Ashlesha is the hidden link between them all. If you look at the film My Mistress, starring Ashlesha's son and Ascendant native Emmanuel Biart, about a female dominatrix with a young man, and you scroll down to the top comments, the first two top comments reference another Ashlesha work. One brings up the Ashlesha moon written 50 Shades of Grey and compares the young man in My Mistress to an early Christian Grey, as Christian was said to have been dominated by an older woman in his youth, nicknamed Mrs. Robinson. The next comment, someone jokes that it's a film of a day in the life of Madonna, known for being highly sexual and enjoying S&M, who has Ashlesha's son. Another clip of My Mistress on YouTube has a top comment comparing it to the 1976 film La Maîtresse. And upon checking that film, the actress who played the dominatrix there had Ashlesha's son as well. 50 Shades of Grey, Venus in Fur, Belle de Jour, La Maîtresse, and My Mistress. All of these films, starring or created by Ashlesha natives, relate to fantasies of domination by either of the genders, depending on who wins in this initiatory battle. 3 of these films depict a man who, during his youth, is dominated by an older woman in a position of authority to him when he is in a younger and more frigid and virginal state, submitting to the mother-like energies of nature and then acting these out later in life. This is the backstory in Venus in Fur, who was dominated by a woman in furs in his youth, as well as is the story of My Mistress and is Christian Grey's backstory. And there are other apparent parallels too, such as in the film Belle de Jour, the Ashlesha native's name is Séverine, a homage to the main male character who craves domination in the novel of Venus in Furs. A dominatrix is also shown in Belle de Jour, when she views a man who wants to be dominated.
Maintenant, marchez-moi dessus. Crachez, piétinez-moi la figure.
Espèce de saligo, vieux cochon, je vais vous apprendre, moi.
And her reaction seems hypocritical.
Comment peut-on descendre aussi bas? Vous avez sans doute l'habitude, mais moi, ça me répugne.
What she saw was a mirror of her own behavior and desires, and even how she is actually dominating over her husband in an indirect way through having sex with other men against his will. But she finds it repulsive when viewing a man with the same desires that she has, and she wants to scorn and punish him as the woman does in Venus in Fur, scolding his groveling nature. They overcome the weak man and yet are still unsatisfied on a deep level because they haven't been charmed, and instead remain like a snake flat on its belly, consuming others. And the man as well remains flat as his own kundalini and interaction with external feminine forces consumes and binds him to earth and retards his growth rather than them raising up together. She naturally becomes the gatekeeper and mirror element of reality to become an embodiment of his desire to not advance further and not to advance or progress past the Swadhisthana center or the Brahma Granthi in yoga, which blocks him and constricts him down, barring him from initiation, and therefore she's also blocked and constricted because her Swadhisthana remains frozen. The instinctual and unconscious fierce and scornful aspect of the divine feminine animating these women can seem torturous and confusing for her, which is what makes this traditionally a difficult or tragic nakshatra to have in some senses, but an incredibly key and essential one at the same time. The Brahma Granthi is the first barrier in yoga that keeps your sexual energy from leaking into earth, and whether one is capable of transmuting the serpent into the dove and giving the kundalini wings, so to speak. All of this can be tied to the Mahavidya goddess Bagalamukhi, who is the Mahavidya associated with the Nagas. The goddess Bagalamukhi is the Brahma Astra, the weapon of Brahma, who uses this weapon to keep unworthy people from progressing spiritually. Bagalamukhi is said to be the goddess of reversals, who turns everything into its opposite, and also causes a kind of impotence or a kind of castration in those who are in some way bad. This is why she stuns and traps them, as she is the stunning and binding goddess, but also reverses gender through removing a man's male nature and giving a woman masculine power, for example, which is why she uses Saturnian energies to suppress and strangle male solar nature. This is why it's she who holds the phallic rod or club, symbolizing that she is capable of stealing and removing the man's sexual nature completely, should he abuse it or want to get rid of it. So male energy, because it is dynamic and moving, it can't exist in this state of stagnation, and so because Cancer is the corrosive, stagnant swamp lowland of the 4th house, it tends to strangulate and entrap any male energy that's too weak to break out of it. It's shown in Wagner's opera Parsifal, where the magician Klingazor traps unwary men with his flower maiden Kundries, who strangulate and inflict the wound or the lance, in that she holds the penis, as was shown earlier in the dominatrix imagery. And so she inflicts that wound on any man that they can entrap and overcome and emasculate. This is also why this nakshatra relates to sacrifice as well as to Stampana Shakti, the power to stop, as a kind of barrier that can only be passed by men who can gain control over their interactions with female or yin forces. This barrier ensures that those who do not properly interact with the opposite energies in reality are held back. So Hlim is her Shakti Bija and is used for Saturn as the power to stop and restrict things. Bagalamukhi means noose face, the ability to captivate someone under your power that she can give you spiritual experiences with, and relates to the snake and bondage imagery of someone's life force being bound and constrained. You can see this noose imagery abundantly as well in Ashlesha films, such as The Ninth Gate, starring an Ashlesha moon actress and Ashlesha ascendant actor, Johnny Depp, which begins with a hanging. Johnny Depp is being hanged as the very first scene of his iconic role in Pirates of the Caribbean. Brittany Murphy, with Ashlesha Ascendant, hangs herself in a frozen state of immaturity in Girl Interrupted. And the first dead virgin girl we see at the close of Virgin Suicides is the one who hangs herself. The occultist Maria de Naglowska had Ashlesha's son and was involved in an occult religious movement that related to hanging around the neck, rituals utilizing spiritual experiences through asphyxiations, and she wrote a book called The Hanging Mystery Initiation. This symbol is also something that came to my attention through my own and my clients' dream symbols on Ashlesha nights or dreams involving Ashlesha natives and hangings. Bagalamukhi, in being the goddess of reversals, displays her paradoxical nature that mimics that of the feminine, as feminine sexuality in and of itself is paradoxical. It's the paradox of the sexual expert and temptress, yet pure virgin, the dainty, vulnerable being that through daintiness actually has more power to consume people, attention, and sexual energy, and the woman who wants to be dominated so much that she ends up as a dominatrix, either consciously or unconsciously, when no one is capable of the challenge. This nakshatra alludes to the nature of women as dainty individuals who would attempt to restrict and control their male partner and claim to want a domesticated man who does whatever they in society says, but then begin secretly fantasizing of a more wild, virile, passionate man who does what they don't want even though deep down they do, because the fantasies of the passive principle are shattered when they need to ask for or explain it. Ashlesha films like Belle de Jour explore the confusing and dangerously contradictory nature of female sexuality, which wants what it doesn't want, but does want, and in that way finds itself often unsatisfied and hungry for the yang, which is rare in the world. Mercury in general rules over all forms of articulation, and Ashlesha is the beginning of that, and the manipulation of the crudest form of energy, which is our raw sexual energy. Another correlation to this idea of learning to procreate and merge with the opposite energy is that Sheshnag is the eldest Naga who performed penance to get the boon mean that he could always have his mind under control and focused on performing austerities. A name of Sheshnag is Sankarshana, which means appropriate attraction, which is why this nakshatra rules over mastering sexual magnetism and maintain intense polarity without losing that polarity with your sexual partner. Ashlesha relates to the potency of sperm and the power of sperm to move forward to fertilize an egg, which is called Sankarshana Shakti, and again relates to this relation of nagas of cultivating towards fertility and virility. This is why Patanjali, the source of modern-day yoga, was considered to be an incarnation of Sheshnag himself, because any ability to manipulate your libido to produce spiritual states or influence the external world is done through articulating, controlling, and expressing your sexual energy. The seductive, girly singing voice of Britt Ekland in this film ties to Mercury's ability to engage in song-making and music, and is shown in real Ashlesha women who sing in breathy, cooing, and naturally seductive and a very feminine manner.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mr. President. Happy birthday to you. No, I don't, maybe just forget it. Lovers keep.
Ashlesha men are also immersed in the stage of avoiding directness or direct penetration, being tightly wound and energetically frozen in a way very similar to the women. You can see this in the movie Don John, which is written, directed by, and starring Ashlesha Moon native Joseph Gordon-Levitt. It is about a man who has a porn addiction.
There's only a few things I really care about in life. My body, my pad, my ride, my family, my church, my boys, my girls, and my porn. My porn.
Even when he attains the girl of his dreams, when he actually gets to have sex with her and expects it to heal his addiction, he still prefers the coldness and indirectness of watching porn.
Baby. What are you doing? I was just reading emails. No, you weren't.
And just like the inverse of an Ashlesha woman desiring a beast-like virile male, it's only when this cold Ashlesha man meets with a warm, Mars-dominant woman, the feminine, when it functions more in accordance with male sexuality, as I've discussed before, who's churned and sexually open, that he learns to melt the ice of his libido and enjoy sex in a more authentic way.
I do lose myself in her.
Like how the height of Mars Tanishta Nakshatra is the opposite nakshatra to Ashlesha. In Don John, he even remarks on his own innate indirectness in that he says he never used to like when women made direct eye contact with him, but enjoyed when the warm Mars woman did.
Now, I don't usually like it when a girl looks me right in the eye, and this girl does that a lot. But I don't know what it is about her. When she does it, I don't mind. I just look right back at her. And pretty soon, I'm hard as a rock.
This mimics the indirect nature of Christian Grey, who makes a contract that even forbids Anna from touching Christian or making eye contact with him. Just like Ashlesha women, Ashlesha men work to dance around and divert any energy directed at them. Just like cats, male Ashlesha natives like Johnny Depp seem penetrated or raped by almost every encounter in films, always being flittery, in a feminine kind of anxious way, like that everything is overwhelming or violating and that everything is gross, as they're very reactionary, which can make them funny to watch. They're often victimized by others due to this indirect nature and their innate sensitivity and how pure and clinging they actually are once they open up to someone. In a similar way to the Ashlesha Purna-Vasu films we saw, we frequently see Ashlesha men being victimized in a sexual manner by more churned and passionate women. In The 40-Year-Old Virgin, Ashlesha sun native Steve Carell is frozen in a kind of childlike state from never having had sex, and again in that film as well, a warmer and more open and heated passionate woman is required to help him melt the ice of his natural frigidity.
Ready?
Yeah.
So it's just amazing to me how many times we're hearing the word virgin in titles throughout films, always films focused on the person exiting that stage of reality.
Wow. You're officially not a virgin.
This nakshatra also relates to when you get abused because of how sensitive you are and are unaware of it, and then stimulate abuse towards others even though you're actually very pure and gentle. Since it's so untainted and is kundalini, everything sort of bothers it. It's extremely sensitive, so it's extremely reactionary. Their mother doesn't nourish them in myths, so they unconsciously want to cling to and completely control another person and regulate the nurturing. So they want to deprive that person sometimes through always diverting energy, gratify that person sometimes, but it's hard for male natives because this cool and watery nature is quite different from their natural function, which makes them prone to being victimized, dominated, or taken advantage of by women. We can see this in other ways, such as Johnny Depp claiming to have been abused physically and emotionally by his ex-wife Amber Heard. In Edward Scissorhands, he is pursued by an older woman, and when he rejects her, his whole life is ruined.
Edward! Edward, you come back here! You can't do that!
In the film Gone Girl, directed by an ASHLESHA moon native, ASHLESHA's son Ben Affleck is abused, framed, and then completely controlled by his own wife.
I should have stopped it! I should have stopped it!
In The Office, Mike Scott is a childlike and innocent character who is upset about the way he is sexually dominated and controlled by his girlfriend Jan.
What do you think of role play?
It can be fun.
Yeah? Well, Jan has this schoolgirl fantasy.
It's a pretty common one.
I feel uncomfortable wearing the dress.
Okay.
This abused and victimized behavior, however, can also extend to ASHLESHA females. Because they are so fixated on purity and are so tightly wound, they become very clingy and fixated on control with the ones they desire, like a snake tightly coiled around a firm object. For that reason, they are devotional and loyal, but are some of the most susceptible types of all to be shattered by a male who she lets access and defile her, and she begins to cling to and wrap around, only to find out he was playing with her, and for him to run away and not commit to or function as a steady being for her, which is also shown in ASHLESHA art. When Lux, the ASHLESHA sister, begins experimenting with her sexuality, she feels in total control over this more dumb man, Trip. As I said earlier, ASHLESHA women will often choose the man she thinks she can control who is dumb or passive, who doesn't bring her true satisfaction, because she thinks she's safer that way. But actually, those are the failing men that she isn't deeply controlling in a higher sense, because he isn't passionately projecting into her or investing anything in her. And therefore, he's more likely to hurt her and cheat on her or discard her, as just as he's easily controlled by her, he's also the type who's easily controlled by other women as well, as his energy is laying flat and undirected. They often leave or drift away the second she lets up on her bondage over him or her mystery is shattered. When she finally gives in to Trip's pursuit and has sex with him on the football field, in the morning she wakes up, dressed in white on the wet grass, alone and abandoned and powerless. Trip has penetrated through her illusion and she no longer holds the power over him like she does with the other boys who are still trapped in virginity, which is similar to the way that we see Megan Fox and Jennifer's body fall from a position of confidence and control to being shattered and afraid when she realizes the danger that can take place when you place yourself in the hands of strange men. She's in high school, so she's used to dealing with men who are in a more virginal and easily controlled state. This vulnerability and fixation on purity is also shown in the movie 6 Years, starring ASHLESHA Ascendant native Thaisa Farmiga, who spends 6 years in a close relationship with a man she trusts, and immediately upon breaking up, she's almost raped and she feels disgusted, afraid, and violated. Because at its core, ASHLESHA is incredibly sensitive, clingy, and loving to the one that it submits to and trusts. The fear and insecurity of being used and abused is so present in ASHLESHA films as an undertone. And for example, 50 Shades of Grey begins with the main character, Anna, studying the book Tess of the D'Urbervilles, A Pure Woman Faithfully Presented, which is a book about a pure woman who gets raped and how it destroys her entire life. As sexualized as ASHLESHA often acts outwardly, its essence is that it's the clinging star and actually only wants to form bonds that it will be able to maintain forever. It's so resistant to penetration in many ways because it is so deeply fearful of losing polarity. This is why use of this nakshatra and Bagalamukhi, who fixes Mars issues, in general is good for marital harmony because it helps to remedy things like Mangala Dosh by making everything extremely cold and tight so no fight or promiscuity arises. Turmeric is used to worship Bagalamukhi and is offered to the Nagas in Kerala snake worship, and is also used in Indian wedding ceremonies to create stability and permanence in relationships. Ashlesha emphasizes only the permanent sexual connection forever, whether that is blissfully uniting with the partner or consuming them completely into paralysis, which is why this nakshatra is the embrace. This is also why this nakshatra is in the private 4th house of Cancer and deeply wants to be insulated from the pain and danger of reality orbiting their chosen partner like the snake coiled around the Shiva lingam. When we have sex with another person, our nervous systems merge together, and Ashlesha individuals such as Idocratic and Samuel Weor are occultists who were particularly obsessed with how you create a permanent bond or perfect marriage that can never be broken and that never lessens in polarity. This technique, which was called Dionysus by some, is a type of sexual practice that relies on the male not having orgasms. In sexual magic, when a man has an orgasm, it's referred to as speaking his word, the semen being the word or the logos. Bagalamukhi rolls over this technique because she's the silencer and she gives the man control over having orgasms or speaking, and this is why there is a very big connection between the tongue and the penis, which is shown in the way that she holds both a tongue and a phallic club. So this goddess is the silencer. When you give control of your tongue and your penis to the goddess, she will immobilize and remove all of your involuntary movements or your tendencies towards expressions of imperfection or untruth. When you don't submit to her and you remain uncontrolled and your energetic projections remain uncontrolled and undirected, she will still immobilize you, but will do so in a way that actually ruins your mind and your nervous system. Because regardless, she will make you still. We can see as well that this is why Ashlesha films express subtle horror at the loss of polarity and the loss of virility and the breaking of connections that takes place when the male orgasm is undirected and lost to the earth. This is shown in Don John in that he stops watching porn when his dream girl, who is more feminine and calculating and cold in being Ashlesha-ish in nature as well, keeps resisting having sex with him and holding him off, and instead forces him only to rub against her but never penetrate. When she finally has sex with him, that withholding power was lost and he immediately sneaks off afterwards to watch porn, showing the pain and confusion for both partners when polarity is lost. In The Lobster, this kind of non-penetrative rubbing is also used as a technique, but in a different way. At the hotel there, the men are not allowed to masturbate or orgasm at all, but each day a maid enters the room and rubs on them until they become erect, and then she leaves. This, like Dionism, is a technique to increase a man's virility and passion and ability to pursue a partner, so he's not turned into an animal.
Today you became erect quicker than on other days. That's good.
Please, just a little longer.
Idocratic in her writings also fixated strongly on the Horiya, who are heavenly, beautiful-eyed women, or some scholars say they are beings of either gender, in Islam who are said to remain youthful, virginal, and pure forever. Horiya means white, essentially, and Shesha and Manasa are described as pearl white. Horiya are described in the Quran as so beautiful, pure, and transparent that the marrow of the bones of their legs will be seen through the bones in the flesh. They can heal themselves.
I am a god.
And they never age, and they also don't have any gross elements like unwanted bodily fluids, which all relate to things that we've explored with this nakshatra being the cat and its snake-like, cat-like, hygienic, and finicky qualities. Idocratic also said that the technique of becoming a Horiya came from and is preserved in Arab belly dancing culture. Ornaments emphasizing this area of the body, such as waist training and lingerie, are prominent with Ashlesha natives. Belly dancing and other aspects of harem culture allow a woman to begin to gain control over her sexual magnetism and turn it on or off depending on what she needs to keep herself safe or to have power. When a person practices the sexual arts correctly, they do not lose their virginity from an occult standpoint. It's not that they're barren, it is that they're pure. Their sexual actions come from an absolute controlled point, a connection to truth and to their true will. So you have the purity that virginal people have without being a literal virgin, which is why this nakshatra relates for its natives to the paradox of things like the sexually voracious virgin, the Horiya in Islamic culture, someone who is so fixated on transmuting all crude elements of sexuality into something higher and eternal. Through Dionysusm, the man resisting to ejaculate is a way to indicate that he has conquered her because he can bring her pleasure without loosening and speaking his word himself. So the secret and more tantric side of ASHLESHA is that having sex that doesn't result in progeny, although when it's done wrongly it destroys the weak, is actually necessary to escape the rules, limitations, and restrictions of the yoni, which is why, although it is a source of being trapped in your human form, it can also be used to access the ultimate transcendence and freedom with the proper techniques. Not ejaculating when having sex with a woman is a technique that relates to defying the yoni, conquering it yet pleasing it, and shows the man is able to make his own kundalini rise and grow wings as the dove, rather than shooting his energy towards the earth so that it becomes a snake. This way he moves towards the transcendent and isn't barred from sexual interaction with women, or isn't running from them or using them or abusing them, and also isn't bound into simply pouring his energy into the earth and progeny. So the tantric passing of this stage relates simply to learning to properly interact with female energies. ASHLESHA as the 9th hexagram, the taming power of the small, is the restraining aspect of yin energy, relating to the refining aspect that a dainty woman has on a beastly man, or that a cold and frigid man has on a loose and warmed martial woman. When Mars increases to a certain point, a certain nagging, restraining, refining influence is necessary, and this is again why Baglamukhi heals Mars issues when Mars becomes too powerful. She becomes the weight on him that naturally teaches him the proper boundaries and limitations to channel his energy, and she trains him like a snake's natural behavior subtly teaches a man to learn stillness and control in order to become a snake charmer. A metaphorical understanding of a man who has overcome the dangerous nature of the feminine forces of reality and can interact with nature without being harmed. This is why when one gets the 9th hexagram, it's generally interpreted as a sign that you should remain still, as the small obstacles will fall away if you do not let them move you, and you remain like the still and stable one, which ties strongly to the way that ASHLESHA is actually very soft and easily overcome. It just wants something to be completely direct, completely assertive towards it, yet it dissolves so many unworthy who simply don't learn the art of stillness and masculine steadiness in the face of feminine forces, and lets her indirectness drive him in all directions instead of just being staunchly direct and transparent. So ASHLESHA also rolls and causes the desire for men to masturbate, such as in Don John, which is the opposite side of the coin of the success of Dionysusm, because when a person falls under the restrictive female influence that he's not directly obtaining or conquering, it can bind his energy into the Muladhara center and prevent it from rising up, which then causes an incredible urge for him to ejaculate in a way that is almost indicative of a kind of defeat, being pulled on and tempted by female energies that he cannot master. This ability to raise one's energy is also why many men and women who are just beginning astral workings orgasm when attempting to astrally project. Snake charmers understand that the way that you control these feminine snake-like energies is through being still and playing the music of your own sexuality melodically, whereas the natural beginner state of male energy is opposite. It's to be constantly moving, dispersed, reactionary, and projecting. It's a power struggle between the genders. The one who makes the other one dance is the dominating one. When a man cultivates the ability to be extremely still in the presence of snake-like feminine energies, he overcomes, satisfies, and controls her so that she can dance and be animated by his force and find happiness, sexuality, and creativity. This is an externalized reflection of his own mastery over his internal feminine, his own kundalini snake, and being able to keep his own energy still and directed so that it does not lie flat. This also relates to what I've talked about before, in that Ketu men have a strong ability to control women in a negative manner through creating irrationally submissive reactions in others, such as cult leaders, because the stillness and naturally void-like energy of Ketu confuses her and makes her instinct submit due to the unresponsive nature of Ketu on an unconscious level. It seems like someone who has mastery over his sexuality when it's actually just someone who has a void-like and non-giving foundational essence. And this ties to ASHLESHA being Ketu's birth nakshatra and Ketu ruling over disabled people, because ASHLESHA creates them, disables them, etc., which relates to the way that women will be unconsciously uncomfortable if she can tell that a man's mind and energy is at all undirected redirected or dispersed. She will never find satisfaction or be able to get in true touch with her libido if her male partner is dwelling in a state of instability, because she will always be tightening more and more like a boa constrictor, doing anything she can to immobilize him and using all of her life force to do so, and will continue this instinctual, spiritual, natural, sacred function whether he satisfies her through his stillness or that she conquers him through her poisonous restriction that even kind of upsets and bothers her, but she has to do it. This is why it's said in a tantric sense that your feminine consort is never truly at fault in a relationship, as triggering as that might sound to some, because it has to be understood that she's the force or the Shakti of instinct that mirrors her consort's own level of mastery and his firmness or his lack of firmness. If you can immobilize your own energy as a man in your own projections, you also master your interactions with women, and many women respond extremely favorably in your presence simply from her intuitive nature picking up on your self-mastery. Alternatively, when she moves to tempt and titillate you, and you move in response, she can control you. She makes you dance through her articulation and song, through feeding off of your fantasies and your desires and embodying them. And so again, this nakshatra relates to the love play battle between masculine and feminine. It can even be an act of love in that she holds you and paralyzes you and controls her consort until he learns to control his own energy, and instead he learns to fascinate and satisfy her when he passes this initiatory stage, essentially, rather than if he becomes a puppet of a woman and returns to the cosmic stages of Punarvasu, which is to be held in the arms of Mother Nature like a helpless child. Punarvasu being Aditi, the actual mother force of this particular universe. Essentially becoming still around a woman is a higher form of submission to her needs than men who are unwillingly paralyzed or who run away after obtaining her. So when the male nature is immature, it doesn't want to be contained and tamed by its lover in a higher sense. It views that aspect of femininity as annoying and always tries to break out from the female grip, which makes her miserable and more blocked and restricted, even in an irrational sense. A mature man does submit to Saturn and wants to control his ego. This then makes his consort finally opened and relaxed, sexual, spacious, and non-restrictive. And then you actually have, as a female consort, a happy, beautiful, pleasant, Bhuvaneshwari type being as your consort, relating to the exaltation of Saturn in Swati, when the only real restriction left is love, because both beings have completely submitted their ego into the union. This can also be considered in context of the saying that you often hear from men referring to their wives as the old ball and chain at home, like the binding dominatrix imagery we saw earlier, and relates to the way that when a man commonly views his spouse as a restrictive, constricting, unhappy force, it's actually a sign that he is failing to simply restrict himself instead, and he's craving to go disperse his energy randomly so that she can't loosen and feel comfort and satisfaction. Because ASHLESHA is the birth star of Ketu and ruled by the god Rahu, it relates to both the masculine and feminine principles finding their position and paths. There is a Ketu mantra from Purohit Darpan, a Brahmanical text, that begins with the bijas Hreem Aim, while Rahu's flips this and begins with Aim Hreem. This highlights the inversions of the path of males relating to Ketu, gaining stillness like a snake charmer to overcome the female. Hreem means that they take illusion, and Aim means that they utilize it skillfully and articulately and break through it. With Rahu's mantra, Aim Hreem, it's implied this feminine nature. They use shrewdness and skill to then inflict illusion on others. So ASHLESHA is non-penetrative sex, while its opposite nakshatra, Dhanishta, is penetrative sex, to being the literal prostitute archetype, while ASHLESHA is the libidinous virgin archetype. Dhanishta has a danger of being too easily and excitedly open and responsive even after they're hurt many times, and ASHLESHA is alternatively in the danger of resisting all penetration of energy and being severed from having such a repressed libido and completely being unresponsive to assertion. And so both have some vulnerability to abuse and fixate on it in different ways. ASHLESHA is ultimately the inexperienced sexual woman that consciously thinks she wants to be in control, but doesn't, and that's why her fantasies arise from within her so powerfully, and she will unconsciously punish and bind men who aren't virile and don't satisfy these deeply buried fantasies relating to being dominated when all she's really experienced cosmically is kind of weak and easily controlled men. Dhanishta is oppositely the one who has been thoroughly warmed and churned by male energy, so much that it's even overheated and tired of male assertion, and so it's warm and caring and nurturing and will not punish a man who's in a weak or cold or frigid state, but will instead, as an archetypal kind of sacred prostitute, function to try to virilize and warm him. We can consider the quote by playwright William Misner, "Treat a whore like a lady and a lady like a whore," in that a woman who is very tightly wound and cold often desires to be dominated, while one who has been exploited and churned and heated desires cold, gentle behavior. So men and women of either temperature are magnetized to the other temperature, which is satisfying and healing for them. If you're familiar with Ayurveda, for example, you can think about how individuals who have aggravated Pitta dosha require Stampana therapy, which is retaining the liquids of the body, while individuals who are frigid require what is known as Svedana therapy, which is the opposite of Stampana therapy and focuses on inducing heat and movement to treat the individual. I talk more in my female spiritual path course on my website about spiritual ways that women can learn to set boundaries regarding who can enter their energetic bounds, in certain mantras and mindsets that do this most effectively to protect from abuse of feminine sexual energy. ASHLESHA and Dhanishta lie on a key axis for the female path. ASHLESHA is the frozen and tight and frigid state of the pure and feminine coiled kundalini, while Dhanishta, as the exaltation of Mars, is essentially the Bhairavi, the woman on fire, fully open and sexually expressive, which actually comes as a natural progression for any woman of any nakshatra in a healthy way when the natural sexual expression of the genders reverse. And so the man, instead of being so reactionary and movement-based, is actually a stable base for a woman to comfortably then become more like that, more looser, more churned, more melted and expressive. And this is why the tantric position flips from the natural position of man on top of woman during sex, and instead she goes on top as the moving and desirous one, showing the woman's carnal nature as fully active, with her on top and her male consort as Shiva, who below her can last eternally long, as she warms and melts and loosens that tight, coiled, restrictive nature. As through practices like Dionism, the male partner has learned to completely control his leakages of energy, and so he can function like this for his female partner. She gets the stability and control from her male active partner that she craves, and he gets the wild, warm, sexual elements in his female partner that he craves, as she, as Maya, begins to embody illusion fully and powerfully, and he begins to penetrate through that illusion and control it at higher and higher levels so that they elevate together. We can see this again in the film The Ninth Gate, starring two ASHLESHA natives, where it ends with his female companion finally having sex with him and glowing with the fires of passion, assuming the position on top of him, becoming the awakened and liberated Babylon from his stillness. Her face flickers into another woman to indicate the quality of Babylon as not one identity but as all women, and he enters the bright castle as he has learned the secret of female nature and how to satisfy and truly unite with it. He's penetrated through her beguiling and confusing indirect methods. Throughout the film, she was stronger than him, subtly dominating over him, and even emasculating him. But now he is truly conquering her through his stillness and passes through this initiatory stage. And now just a friendly reminder that these videos take a huge amount of effort, and as anyone who has made it this far into the video knows, this is very like niche information that's impossible to be widely popular just due to its obscure nature of combining Vedic astrology with occultism in the media and art and all these other layers. And so if you like my work, please be aware that it's only possible through the support of like rare individuals like you who share my interests and would appreciate something like this. So for that reason, I would be highly grateful if you consider donating to my Patreon, which every little bit helps. And on my Patreon there are extras that come with each video if you are a Jeshta level patron or higher. This video, the extra, is a 20-page written version of this entire video for easy reference and study, including some visuals, or of course consider getting one of my services where I can work with you one-on-one to explore your personal mythology and your nakshatras and chart as a whole. I would love to find out what cosmic mythology moves through and surrounds you, and to help you achieve the highest of your personal potential, which is always my goal in all the services that I do. Thanks so much to my Revati level patrons listed here, to my Abhijit level patrons, Boris, Patino, Madison Wells, and Grace, for your belief and support in my work. It's so appreciated. I can't wait to read your comments. Please don't forget to like and share this video, and I will see you next time.